One member, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, was designated Defendant 113. He would go on to become number 2 in Al-Qaeda. In prison, Zawahiri came face to face with Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman, the blind sheikh. Rahman was also accused of complicity in Sadat's assassination. The trial ended in 1984. At the time, Zawahiri and Rahman were seen as insignificant participants in the assassination and were acquitted. Rahman later moved to New York and helped to plan the bombing of the World Trade Center in 1993. Zawahiri left Egypt and made his way to Afghanistan. Muslims and Afghan nationalists had been fighting the Soviet forces there since the invasion by the Red Army in 1979.
He could see Afghanistan as a place to remold his revolutionary Islamic groups and create a kind of force that then could be used in Egypt and elsewhere.
Zawahiri's belief in the effectiveness of large-scale suicide killings was destined to enlist a powerful backer. By 1986, Zawahiri had established his training camp across the Afghan border in Peshawar, in Pakistan.
Peshawar was where the jihad against the Soviets really was organized. All the different mujahideen groups had their representatives there. Spies from all over the world were there.
In Peshawar, Zawahiri came into contact with Abdullah Azzam, an Islamic cleric from the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Sheikh Abdullah Azzam was a key Palestinian Brotherhood member who was teaching Osama bin Laden.
Azzam had taken Osama bin Laden under his wing in Saudi Arabia in the early 1980s. Bin Laden then followed his teacher to Peshawar, where he began working to develop what would become known as the base, or Al-Qaeda. One of Zawahiri's stratagems was the notion of suicide bombing. This relatively new concept for Sunni Muslims would engender future attacks around the world. Zawahiri became bin Laden's right-hand man. While intelligence specialists insist the Brotherhood continues to attract members in the United States, the State Department does not include the Muslim Brotherhood in its official list of 41 terrorist groups. Recent investigations suggest that some European members of the Brotherhood have channeled funds to Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations.
On the 3rd of July 1979, President Jimmy Carter secretly authorized the CIA to spend $500,000 in covert support of the Afghan opposition. The modest beginning of a 10-year operation involving billions of dollars. With America's clandestine help, a ragtag army of Afghan tribesmen and farmers defeated one of the world's 2 superpowers.
U.S. National Security Advisor Brzezinski flew to Pakistan to set about rallying resistance. He wanted to arm the Mujahideen without revealing America's role. On the Afghan border near the Khyber Pass, he urged the soldiers of God to redouble their efforts.
We know of their deep belief in God, and we are confident that their struggle will succeed. That land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
As Soviet tanks rolled in, refugees came pouring out of Afghanistan, most of them to neighboring Pakistan. There, the CIA armed and funded the rebels, but left a program worth millions of dollars entirely in the hands of the Pakistani intelligence service.
The CIA played more of a quartermaster's role in the campaign. They stood back and let the Pakistan army do the direct training of the Mujahideen. This was something that the Pakistanis insisted upon, and it also suited the Americans, who looked at the politics of the jihad and essentially said, no more hearts and minds for us. If the Pakistanis want to decide who the political winners and losers ought to be, which guerrilla leaders ought to get the most guns and money, that's fine. Let them decide it.
By 1984, the US was spending $200 million a year on the Afghanistan war and seeing results. A classified CIA analysis reported that the Soviets had suffered 17,000 soldiers killed or wounded. The Mujahideen now controlled well over half the country. Soviet losses amounted to more than 350 aircraft and more than 2,750 tanks and armored vehicles, at a total cost of $12 billion. After 5 years, stalemate. President Ronald Reagan and CIA Director William Casey decided to triple the budget for weapons to the Mujahideen.
When the Stinger was deployed, and it was the only U.S. weapons system that had been used in the conflict, and it was quite controversial that we were using that weapon system. Within the first few days of being deployed, 3 helicopters were shot down. It had a tremendous impact on Soviet military planning.
The new president, George H.W. Bush, kept the CIA in the Afghan game.
The Saudi royal family wanted to build a Muslim army known as the Mujahideen to defend Islam and force the Russians out. They turned to their trusted advisors, the bin Ladens, who offered up a lanky 21-year-old named Osama. The man who personally chose Osama bin Laden to build that army would also become his mentor, Saudi Prince Turki Al Faisal. On British television, he reminisced about the young bin Laden.
In those days, he was a young man who had committed himself to helping the Afghan Mujahideen liberate themselves from the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan.
MI6 supplied small arms, they supplied money, principally they supplied radio equipment, Racal radio transmitters. There was also a period when they were supplying blowpipe missiles.
But this had to remain a black op. The Islamic Mujahideen had links to known anti-Western terrorist groups.
Once SIS was authorized to actively involve itself inside Afghanistan, obviously it was a very sensitive matter. The numbers involved were very small. There were only 2 or 3 people who went in each time to do the training.
With the help of MI6, the Mujahideen won the battle for Afghanistan.
Well, at the end of the campaign, what do you do with all these guerrillas that have been recruited and are highly trained? You have thousands of guerrillas in Afghanistan, nowhere to go.
But some of these guerrillas did have somewhere to go. They already had links with Islamic terrorist groups elsewhere.
There were some serious players sent to Bosnia, among them the man who planned 9/11, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and Abu Suleiman al-Maki, here on the right of Osama bin Laden. One reason he's sitting down, he was shot in the legs in Bosnia. British Muslim convert Andrew Rao, jailed on terrorism charges, was also in Bosnia in the mid-90s. Documents passed to us indicate the scale of the problem. Sky News has obtained several documents marked top secret, amongst them this, which lists 1,700 names of Mujahideen fighters. There are dozens of Saudis, Yemenis, Egyptians, and among them there are 5 Britons. These pages show the names of several hundred Mujahideen who were given Bosnian passports after the war, and that they changed their names. For example, Abdullah Khalid becomes Klokic.
It's quite clear and apparent that MI6 was involved, to what degree we do not know, but certainly was involved to some extent with groups that were part of the Al-Qaeda network.